Hello, greetings everyone. This is Mathew Cherian. Welcome to our webinar today. Today's topic is expanding global access to complex generics, and the panelist is Dr. Sarah Ibrahim. Sarah, you can take it from there. Can we go to the next slide?
Yes, absolutely.
Yes, so I'm moderating today's webinar, Mathew Cherian. I'm with Aini. She's a pharmacist from Indonesia with experience in pharmaceutical industry. We'll be the moderators. And let's go to the next slide. Yes, the panelist today is Dr. Sarah Ibrahim. She's Associate Director for Stakeholder and Global Engagement at the Office of Generic Drugs at the US FDA. She has held important positions at the FDA, and she has presented webinars in the past for us. She initiated the Office of Generic Drugs Patient Engagement Program and launched its first patient listening session series, collaborating with other CDER and FDA offices. She facilitates the stakeholder engagement on issues pertaining to the globalization of the generic industry. Let's go to the next slide. This webinar is being recorded and it's live streamed via YouTube. The recording will be available on our website, FIP website. There you can see the link to the website for a whole year. You can ask questions using the question box that you will find at the bottom of your screen. You are also welcome to provide feedback to the webinars at FIP.org link. We welcome you to become a member of FIP, and you can go to the FIP website and look at that. One interesting thing I want to tell you today is that for the first time, we are offering live translation in about 30 languages. This is made possible by artificial intelligence. In the past, we used to offer 1 to 3 languages. Now it is more like 30. So here is the instruction on how to access the particular language that you would like to hear. You can turn on the captions, enable the translation toggle, and select your language. Let's go to the next slide.
Okay.
There it is. It's all yours, Sarah.
Thank you so much, Matthew. I appreciate it. And thank you so much, everyone, for joining. As Dr. Mathew Cherian already mentioned, I'm Sarah Ibrahim. I'm the Associate Director for Stakeholder and Global Engagement in the FDA Office of Generic Drugs. I'm pleased to be here and share FDA's evolving strategy for enhancing global access to complex generic drug products. Now, the presentation will highlight the importance of regulatory convergence, global collaboration, and harmonized scientific standards, especially as they relate to facilitating access to complex generics worldwide. Now, through OGD's Global Affairs program that I established around 5 years ago and the generic drug cluster that I established 4 years ago, we're actively working with regulatory counterparts to reduce barriers, align expectations, and accelerate approvals. Now, while our regulatory authority is US-based, the public health impact of generics knows no boundaries, and our collective actions can substantially increase access, affordability, and equity in global markets. And as always, before we begin, I'd like to note that the views expressed in this presentation are my own and do not necessarily represent the official policies or positions of the United States Food and Drug Administration. That being said, my work is deeply rooted in FDA's mission to protect public health, and today's discussion truly reflects the collaborative and forward-looking spirit of the agency. So generic drugs have been a cornerstone of healthcare affordability in the United States as well as globally. Over the past 30 years, they've saved hundreds of billions of dollars and have enabled broader access to essential therapies. We're also seeing increased challenges. The cost of medications continues to rise, driven by increased brand name drug pricing and a growing demand due to chronic disease prevalence. Now, at the same time, the generic drug market is under pressure. Declining margins, fewer competitors in critical sectors, and increasing costs of compliance and innovation, especially for complex generics. It's essential that we not only preserve but strengthen the foundation of affordable care through regulatory innovation, supply chain resilience, as well as a global vision for generic accessibility. The value of generic drugs truly extends far beyond cost savings. Now, price competition among generics play a key role in controlling healthcare costs and improving access. Their broader contribution to public health are equally vital. Affordability does promote medication adherence and reduces financial barriers for both patients and healthcare systems. But generics shouldn't be viewed solely as a cheaper alternative. Generics strengthen the supply chain of pharmaceuticals by encouraging multiple manufacturers to produce the same medication. It reduces reliance on a single source and therefore mitigating the risk of shortages. Now, this diversity enhances supply chain resilience and ensures a more stable and flexible availability of medications, particularly during disruptions. Now, what's equally important is the role that generics play in therapeutic continuity, formulary coverage, and enabling confident prescribing. So for complex diseases where substitutions may involve devices or sophisticated formulations, ensuring high-quality alternatives is critical to maintaining patient care. So by supporting adherence and access, generics contribute to a more efficient, equitable, and resilient healthcare system. Now, despite their critical role in public health, the generic drug industry is under growing pressure. With profit erosion, continual price compression, and reduced market entry for older generics are straining the financial sustainability of many manufacturers. Now, these challenges are further intensified by an over-reliance on a limited number of global suppliers for active pharmaceutical ingredients, often concentrated in just a few countries. Now, this dependency increases vulnerability to geopolitical shifts, natural disasters, or any other global disruptions, posing serious risks to supply chain stability. The development of complex generics presents an even steeper climb. Now, these products often require advanced analytical methods, comparative clinical studies, and innovative bioequivalence approaches. And navigating diverse and often divergent regulatory expectations across our jurisdictions consumes substantial time as well as resources. We can discourage investment and delay patient access to much-needed therapies if the status quo remains. Now, addressing these systematic challenges demands more of a coordinated response, streamlined and harmonized regulatory frameworks, strategic incentives to bolster domestic manufacturing capacity, as well as international collaboration to strengthen the resilience of the global pharmaceutical supply chain. So thriving in today's global pharmaceutical landscape requires adaptability, strategic foresight, and alignment with evolving scientific and regulatory expectations. Manufacturers must navigate increasing complexity, rising demands for transparency, and the need for global consistency in both quality and access. Success hinges on a multifaceted strategy. It's competitive pricing, strategic partnerships, resilient and diversified supply chains, and investment in advanced manufacturing capabilities. A diverse generic drug portfolio enables manufacturers to address regional health disparities and deliver value through targeted therapies. At the same time, a robust supply chain management, including redundancy planning and geographically dispersed manufacturing hubs, really helps mitigate any disruptions and ensure continuous product availability. From a regulatory perspective, aligning with global expectations really involves strengthening mutual reliance frameworks, streamlining information sharing, and eliminating duplicative assessments. Regulatory convergence reduces time to market and facilitates efficient global access. So FDA's initiatives, such as the Global Affairs Program and the Generic Drug Cluster, are central to advancing this vision. These efforts support the creation of a predictable, efficient, and scientifically harmonized pathways, fostering innovation and ensuring patients worldwide have timely access to high quality, safe, and effective generic medications. The global nature of drug development demands coordinated cross-border solutions, regulatory convergence where agencies align on scientific standards, expectations, and decision-making process is not just aspirational. It's essential for ensuring timely access to safe, effective, and generic medications worldwide. Now, regulatory harmonization aims, as I mentioned, to reduce duplication, promote transparency, and establish consistent criteria for the approval of generics. Far from lowering the bar, convergence actually raises the level of consistency and predictability across the regulatory systems. So when agencies speak a common scientific languages, it minimizes uncertainty for manufacturers, thereby accelerating approvals and strengthening the public confidence in generic drugs. To that end, agencies are in fact increasingly working together to recognize each other's inspections, share knowledge, and collaborate on scientific discussions and reviews. One of the key priorities is to remain upholding high standards for manufacturing quality, safety, and efficacy. Open communication with pharmaceutical industry is also central to this effort, and it really does allow us to create a clear, navigationally easy regulatory landscape and addressing that shared challenge in a very proactive and coordinated manner. So the FDA will continue to champion these efforts through active participation in international coalitions and leadership in regulatory clusters such as the Generic Drug Cluster. So harmonization in drug development, the alignment of regulatory standards, processes, and requirements across global regions plays a vital role in creating a more efficient and equitable healthcare system. By promoting consistency and scientific technical standards, harmonization streamlines the submission and review process, reducing variability in approval requirements across our countries. The benefits of global convergence are broad and measurable. So when regulatory agencies align, there's fewer duplicative studies are required, cutting both cost and development time. And enhanced collaboration enables mutual recognition, for example, of maybe assessments as well as facilities that our global data exchange allows for faster and simultaneous market entry into multiple regions. Regulatory harmonization also improves the quality of the regulatory science through shared learning and collective problem solving. It enhances resource efficiency for both regulators as well as industry alike. It frees up capacity to focus more on innovation and public health priorities. In the context of global health emergencies, a harmonized system improves preparedness and accelerates response efforts. Most importantly, harmonization builds trust. So when regulators around the world converge on standards, patients and providers alike gain greater confidence in the medications they use. So let's talk a little bit about complex generics for a while. So complex generics are products that involve intricate active ingredients, formulations, route of delivery, or a drug-device combination. These characteristics present unique scientific as well as regulatory challenges. It requires a more sophisticated approach to demonstrate therapeutic equivalence. The FDA's evolving regulatory framework for complex generics is designed to address these challenges while ensuring patient safety and product efficacy. The evaluation considers the totality of evidence, including bioequivalence, usability, and the overall product performance. Differences in formulation or device design are carefully assessed to ensure that the generic drug product can in fact be substituted for the reference product without the need for additional significant prescriber or patient training. By providing that clear scientific expectation and robust guidance, the FDA encourages innovation and investment in these critical products. While complex generics must meet rigorous safety, efficacy, and quality standards, the agency's transparent approach reduces development uncertainty, supports efficient review, and accelerates market access, ultimately reinforcing public confidence and expanding patient access to high-quality therapies. So does the definition really matter? Well, the FDA's definition and classification of complex generic drug products does serve as a cornerstone for regulatory clarity as well as clinical confidence. A well-defined regulatory category ensures predictability for developers, consistency for reviewers, and critical guidance for clinicians and patients. For healthcare providers, understanding whether a product is classified as a complex generic informs substitution decisions as well. These products often involve distinct formulations, delivery mechanisms, or drug-device combinations, factors that really can influence the therapeutic outcomes. And FDA's clear guidelines help clinicians determine whether substitution is appropriate without compromising patient safety or treatment efficacy. That consistent medication performance is essential for informed prescribing, and the regulatory status of a complex generic offers reassurance that the product does in fact meet rigorous standards. From a development and regulatory perspective, classification as a complex generic may trigger additional requirements, such as comparative testing, human factor studies, or device usability assessment. Now, these requirements ensure that any differences from the reference product does not interfere with safe and effective use. Inconsistency across global agencies in defining complex generics can lead to diverging data requirements, increased development costs, as well as delayed market access. Now, this underscores the importance of international dialogue on definitions and regulatory expectations, enabling harmonization, reducing inefficiencies, and supporting faster access. So what do complex generics represent? They really represent a high-value, strategic growth frontier for the generic drug industry. As traditional generics face market saturation and shrinking profit margins, these complex generics offer differentiated opportunities, particularly in specialized therapeutic areas. Now, these products often feature advanced formulations and innovative drug-device combination that improve possibly patient adherence and better clinical outcomes. And their sophisticated design and therapeutic benefits elevate their perceived value in clinical practice. Due to the scientific and technical complexity involved, complex generics typically face limited market competition, but that also allows for extended periods of market exclusivity. So the regulatory incentives further support development by rewarding innovation and reducing the risks associated with navigating a more demanding development pathway. To fully realize the potential of complex generics, continued investment is needed in regulatory clarity and international alignment. reducing ambiguity, streamlining expectations, and creating more transparent, risk-based development frameworks. Complex generics do face distinct regulatory challenges, largely due to the absence of specific harmonized standards across national pharmacopoeias. In many regions, these products are registered based on a broad general recommendation rather than a tailored guideline, introducing potential risks to safety, efficacy, and quality. The regulatory ambiguity can also slow development, increase cost, and create uncertainty for both the manufacturers as well as the healthcare providers. So that global scientific uniformity is essential to overcoming these challenges and is in fact a cornerstone of true regulatory convergence. So when agencies align on the core scientific principles, methodologies, and data standards, it fosters consistency and drives a more predictable regulatory outcomes. This is not only to lower development costs and enhance efficiency, which it does, but it also improves patient access and clinical outcomes. At the FDA, we do actively share our regulatory science insights with international peers and gain valuable knowledge through reciprocal collaboration. That scientific alignment also enhances global preparedness, as I mentioned, by enhancing that faster coordinated action through shared standards, especially when we can predict some of the global challenges that are forthcoming. So that unified regulatory expectation for complex generics is not just a technical goal. It's a public health imperative that supports innovation and safeguards our patients. So the generic drug cluster established by the FDA in 2021 is the first global regulatory forum dedicated to enhancing alignment in the scientific assessment of generic drug products. This multi-country initiative brings together major regulatory authorities to really build the common understanding of regulatory requirements and promote convergence in regulatory science. The cluster meets quarterly to exchange perspectives, discuss real-world case studies, and identify opportunities for scientific alignment. What began as a conceptual collaboration has evolved into an operationally impactful platform, shaping expectations across our borders. And we do foster transparency, mutual learning, and shared approaches to specifically complex regulatory challenges. So the generic drug cluster has centered its efforts on fostering global dialogue to bridge gaps in the approval of complex generic drugs. This forum provides a platform for regulatory agencies to identify and discuss key differences in their approaches, ranging from expectations to bioequivalence standards to the acceptance of modeling and simulation in place of traditional in vivo data. These inconsistencies, as I mentioned, can hinder the timely approval for complex generics and discourage industry investment. So by surfacing these practical challenges through open dialogue, the cluster really facilitates a shared understanding of the regulatory hurdles and the scientific principles. And through experience sharing and targeted convergence, participating agencies are working collaboratively to reduce the regulatory burdens without compromising any of the scientific rigor or patient safety. So let's talk again about how vital this platform has become. It does bring agencies from around the world to really exchange knowledge and address shared challenges and align scientific standards in the regulation of complex. So in this presentation, I would like to highlight how the cluster is in fact tackling some of the most intricate issues in the generic drug development. And as I mentioned, our goal is to really foster that greater consistency, transparency, and efficiency. Since its inception, the cluster has achieved some meaningful progress, real-time case exchanges on complex products, such as inhalation therapies and injectables, joint collaboration of definitions and regulatory thresholds for complex generics, and shared learning on clinical endpoints by equivalent strategies, as well as analytical comparability. And the impact is clear. Manufacturers do benefit from a much clearer expectation that reduces redundancy. So the generic drug cluster has evolved into a cornerstone of our international regulatory cooperation. It brings together, as I mentioned, a number of generic drug industries that it's not just symbolic. It is actually operationally impactful. We do have regular meetings that result in case-based exchanges. And when we discuss these real-world challenges, such as divergent views on bioequivalence, device similarity requirements, or data expectations, the cluster helps identify opportunities for convergence. When we have a more predictable, transparent regulatory process, it does incentivize manufacturers to invest in these products. These efforts do directly serve public health. So when regulatory pathways are more consistent, patients gain quicker and more equitable access to high quality, affordable products. So one of the most impactful aspects is its role in clarifying regulatory expectations around bioequivalence standards, as well as product-specific guidances. Now, this is a crucial area for complex generics, where divergence between regulatory agencies has historically posed challenges, and the cluster has facilitated alignment on specific case studies, including, and I'm only naming a few examples, nasal suspension products, vancomycin capsules, as well as focus on BCS3 class 3 drugs. Now, the discussions have helped in understanding or converging some of the scientific dialogues related to bioequivalence requirements. And beyond individual products, the cluster has also advanced broader regulatory science. So, for instance, collaborative discussions have refined expectations around in vitro release testing and in vivo pharmacokinetic evaluations, especially for difficult to develop products like topical generics, as well as protein-bound formulations such as paclitaxel. Another very high-level area of progress, as I mentioned, has been bioequivalence strategies for complex parenteral drugs, including iron carbohydrate complexes. That focused exchange within the cluster have clarified the type of data required, improving regulatory strategies and enabling manufacturers to possibly design better, more efficient development programs. Another tangible and highly impactful achievement, as I mentioned, was the focus on product-specific guidances. And these discussions have proven invaluable for clarifying regulatory expectations, not just to industry, but to regulatory agencies alike. So by sharing that regulatory experience, the lessons learned, as well as real-world case studies, participating agencies are able to compare their individual requirements and methodologies, and allows a mutual understanding that does open doors for harmonization of standards, particularly where areas of scientific divergence pose significant challenges for industry. And the alignment result directly benefits the global generic drug landscape by making approval processes more consistent and, as I mentioned, more predictable. For manufacturers, we've heard that greater regulatory clarity is sensed, and it does allow for fewer duplicative studies and a more efficient development pathway. As I mentioned, the discussions really do allow the regulatory scientific collaboration and insight on data that would not have been available had the cluster not been established. Now, as we advance our regulatory collaboration through the generic drug cluster, there are several challenges that we've recognized and require continuous attention and adaptive strategies. And we're improving, and that is what a gold standard is. The increasing complexity of submissions. The nature of generic drug development is evolving rapidly, and submissions are becoming increasingly sophisticated, often involving novel manufacturing technologies, innovative formulations, and advanced analytical methods. Now, assessing these submissions requires specialized expertise and enhanced regulatory science capabilities. And that complexity poses challenges not just for scientific review, but also for ensuring that there is consistency across global regulators. The ongoing instability in the global supply chain continues to impact drug development and approval timelines. Disruptions in availability of key starting materials, APIs, or finished products have made it more difficult for regulators to expedite approvals and maintain a steady supply of essential medications. And this really does highlight the need for a more resilient regulatory process that can adapt to external shocks while upholding quality standards. And then, of course, the most difficult one, which is the resource constraints. Not all of the participating agencies have the same level of capacity or access to resources. Limited staff, infrastructure, or possibly funding can delay assessments for limit participation in regulatory convergence efforts. Now, these disparities, in fact, really make it more important that we collaborate, because it allows agencies to leverage shared knowledge and reduce the duplication of effort. And then, of course, some of the regulatory challenges, especially those tied to complex generics, require input across many disciplines. So we need to bring clinical, bioequivalence, device specialists, and coordinating that input across a very diverse regulatory area and across the agencies can, in fact, be difficult. And aligning timelines, priorities, review standards is essential to really ensure timely science-based decisions are made. So what have we done so far? Well, in response to these challenges, the generic drug cluster has proactively implemented some key solutions to enhance that regulatory collaboration. And we're focusing on enhanced technical understanding. So one of the most effective strategies has been the deepening of technical discussions among participating agencies. And these exchanges have significantly improved the collective technical and regulatory understanding. So for example, as I mentioned, technical quality discussions surrounding vancomycin in vitro testing have helped ensure alignment with relevant product-specific guidances that does promote regulatory consistency. The cluster has also organized targeted workshops and expanded working sessions on an ad hoc basis to focus particularly on complex regulatory issues. And these sessions have been instrumental in addressing certain topics such as bioequivalence strategies, modeling and simulation, and experience, as well as acceptability of those as regulatory pathways for complex generics. In-depth discussions have focused on opportunities to compare review frameworks as well as explore areas of convergence possibilities. So collectively, as I mentioned, this has improved coordination, understanding, as well as a more bridged regulatory pathway through better communication amongst these agencies. Now, it has resulted in a far-reaching impact on global regulatory practice. It has strengthened decision-making, streamlining processes, and advancing scientific dialogue, convergence, and harmonization in the field of generic drug regulation. One of the most notable benefits has been the integration of cross-agency insights into national regulatory frameworks. So discussions within within the cluster have provided agencies with a broader perspective on really complex issues, such as, again, bioequivalence evaluations, formulation comparability, device use assessments, and so forth. These insights lead to a deeper technical understanding because the information shared could not have been shared outside this confidential forum. And with incorporating that shared knowledge, you do start seeing a greater consistency because the scientific framework upon which the regulatory decision has been made is clearer to all of the regulatory agencies involved. Now, this is a collaborative model. We know that it enhances current processes, but it also sets a strong foundation for continued innovation and foresight for regulatory agility, as well as global convergence moving forward. Now, as we reflect on the progress and the potential of the generic drug cluster, it is clear that the initiative has become an indispensable platform for international regulatory collaboration. It creates a space where agencies can engage openly, sharing strategies, aligning on best practices, and addressing shared challenges. We're building a more effective global regulatory environment, and the impact is already visible. There is better clarity from industry's perspective on a lot of the efforts that we have been working on. And truly, to summarize, that the value and the true value still continues to lie ahead. And on behalf of the Office of Generic Drugs in the United States Food and Drug Administration, thank you so much for attending. And I believe this is a time for the Q&A.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sarah Ibrahim, for your insightful presentation. And I am sure many of our attendees are eager to dive deeper into this topic. We are now moving into the Q&A session, and I encourage everyone to submit your question to the Q&A panel on your screen. At this moment, we have 2 questions, and I will read the first question. So the question is from Swati. While we talk about harmonization of scientific standards, however, FDA doesn't publish or share the evaluation summary report, which can be referenced by other regulatory authorities. Is there any pathway that FDA-approved generic drug report can be shared to other authorities in the world for accelerated drug approval process? Maybe you can answer directly, Sarah.
Oh, absolutely. I think that's a great question. To answer the last part of the question first, because I think that's the most relevant, we do share our assessment bases, our reviews in certain situations, as well as detailed evaluation and review reports in a very structured mechanism that ensures that FDA can still protect the applicant's information, but we do share that. And FDA does have confidentiality commitments as well as certain mutual recognition agreements that do allow for confidential sharing of non-public information. I mentioned that the generic drug cluster is one of those. We have had those instances. Now, on another basis, the redacted review is in fact in the public domain, at least for the new drug applications. There are instances, many instances, where the generic drug application review is also in a redacted form available in the public domain. It typically depends on the product, the criticality and the importance of having that particular ANDA review in a public domain, or even the number of FOIA requests that come for a particular application. So just to summarize, there's a significant portion of publicly available information that would really provide an overview of the regulatory decision basis that the FDA has approved products more significantly so for new drug applications, and that is to help generic drug manufacturers. And for generic drug applications, when warranted and needed, but also when there's an increase in public need and demand for these particular review outline or structure. On the other side of sharing that with other regulatory agencies, we do have the mechanisms in place. We do have and have had in the past shared many reviews with other regulatory agencies for many reasons. Could be that the applicant themselves, wanted that because they don't own the review. Who owns the review is the regulatory agencies, and they can share it with one another. It could also be for public health reasons, could be specifically for inspectional reasons. So there are a number of reasons why we have shared reviews. The biggest component is that the agency will continue to strive to maintain protection of data that is owned by these applicant holders.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Sarah Ibrahim. And now we move to the second question from Isaac. The question is, touching on the global regulatory harmonization, there seemed to have been little mention of the involvement of Africa region. Any further insight?
That's a great question. I did not describe all of our international collaborations. I only mentioned the generic drug cluster, given its nuance, its significance, and the fact that we are coming up to celebrating 4 years since I established the cluster. But there is, in fact, collaboration that occurs globally. And there is significant collaboration that has occurred with the upcoming African Medicines Agency as well. In fact, I was in Egypt last year for a DIA conference to really emphasize the collaboration that the FDA has had with the African continent throughout the years, and what we predict and what we continue to strive to do in the African continent. So really the type of collaboration has been significant over the years. We are supporting and have supported capacity building under the African Medicines Regulatory Harmonization Initiative that really does engage with the emerging African Medicines Agency through multilateral platforms. We've provided in the past as well training, some technical assistance under some of these global partnerships. And as I mentioned, there are other elements such as medical product access initiatives, and all of these do involve close collaboration between FDA and Africa. But on a larger scale, we do collaborate with all of the regulatory agencies worldwide, and it really is a very targeted approach. So while we want to know what agencies want from us, and they do approach us with their needs, their requirements, and we try as much as resource can allow to really collaborate and make sure that agencies around the world understand and know FDA's expectations, regulatory framework, because the end goal is really, it's the health of our citizens, but health knows no boundary.
Yeah, great answer, Dr. Ibrahim. Now we have the third question. The question is, how is the new US administration impacting the work of the FDA so far, and what do you expect to change in the future?
That's a great question. And I have been at the FDA for 10 years now. I've seen a number of administrations. And what I would say is that the FDA has a very clear mission. And the mission is to promote and protect public health. In my 10 years tenure, and how much I've learned from all of my predecessors and my mentors, the agency's mission has not changed, does not change, and we continue to protect and promote public health, to make America healthy, to maintain the protection for our citizens. And really the shift is not one that impacts the mission of the agency, because the current administration also has the same mission and vision for the FDA, which is to protect and promote public health. And we continue to make sure that we're all working towards the same mission and vision.
Okay, thank you for the answer. And we have a question about the urgent needs based on your experience. We know that access needs often vary depending on the type of medication involved. In your view, are there particular therapeutic areas or product types where improving global access to complex generics is most urgently needed?
That's a very good question. Well, it's difficult to really say what classification or what clinical element, because it varies. Access needs do vary significantly across the globe. The needs for medications in low and middle income countries, in the context of public health emergencies, are very different. The needs are shaped by the disease burden, supply chain vulnerabilities, the healthcare system capacity, and really understanding the importance. So a very good example is in certain regions, antibiotic access is critical. That or anti-malarial medications may be critical for one continent versus the other, one region versus the other. So it really does depend. Now, we know there are some high need therapeutic areas globally, right? It's the certain infectious diseases, some rare diseases, reproductive health, non-communicable diseases, whether it's cancer, diabetes, cardiovascular conditions. So really, it depends. There's some core components, right? The very widespread diseases that our populations struggle with. But the main component is some of these do change based on the disease burden and the healthcare systems across the world.
Thank you for the answer. That's very great answer. And also we have one question about the challenge of complex generics in biopharmaceuticals. While much of the focus tend to be on small molecule generics, biopharmaceutical represent a growing part of the complex generics in the market. So what unique challenges do biopharmaceuticals face in the context of complex generics? And how is the FDA addressing these challenges in global policy and regulatory affairs?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So I just want to clarify, are we talking about biologics in general? Are we talking about large molecules? Are we talking about biosimilars? If I can get some, because it really does vary. We can talk about biologics, biosimilars, monoclonal antibodies. Are they fusion proteins? Are we talking about peptide-based therapeutics? All of them face very unique and complex challenges. And to really break down the scientific and technical challenges, whether it's the structural complexity and heterogeneity of these products, high sensitivity of manufacturing conditions, immunogenicity risks, complex quality control challenges for these products, all of these are in fact discussed because the agency does have other collaborative clusters and other collaborative mechanisms for these particular subject areas. So we do have a biosimilars cluster, for example, that focuses on biosimilar products. We do have one for vaccines. We do have one for rare disease. So we really do have a number of collaborations that allow the subject matter experts to have in-depth technical discussions that do pave the way for that scientific alignment and convergence.
Thank you, Dr. Sarah. Next question from Aminata Sowi. Are there any other ways on how to improve the potential benefits of global harmonization?
Wow, that's a deep question. Well, there are a number. We do have as I mentioned, we do have one that I mentioned today, which is the generic drug cluster, and that is not the only FDA international effort. There are multiple strategic pathways that the agency has allowed. So a very good example, one, as I mentioned, the regulatory clusters. We have many of them. Generic drug cluster, biosimilar clusters, Project Orbis, which is a major project that allows parallel review amongst agencies for oncology medications. It's a critical access issue and challenge globally. We have the mutual recognition agreements that allow inspectional sharing of information. And of course, we have the ICH platform that really does focus on the harmonization of regulatory standards on a global scale. And of course, the presence of entities such as IPRP engagement. That's also another venue that the agency and especially my group also involves in. So we do have a number of mechanisms. Now, I do want to also say that the FDA is a very data knowledge wealthy agency, and our webpage is rich in scientific resources, technical resources, regulatory resources that do allow insight, not just for industry, but also for regulatory agencies worldwide. So I do want to think of it as active international collaboration, and I mentioned a few of them, even the latest, the ECMRA collaboration that really does allow some alignment in the manufacturing changes, products across the globe. But there's also the passive one. In essence, you have a very rich resource on our webpage that does allow continuous insight on the evolving regulatory standards and scientific expectations from the FDA.
Thank you, Dr. Sarah. Now, because we have about more 5 minutes left for our Q&A, we have one more question.
Sure.
Regarding the development of breakthrough medicine, let's take one case, Neuralink, other metaverse-related medical technologies, or digital medicine. These discoveries would certainly become the first patented generic drugs. How does the FDA respond to the regulation of these novel drugs?
So I missed the name of I missed the name. Can you repeat the question?
Okay. Regarding the development of breakthrough medicine, let's take one case, Neuralink, other metaverse-related medical technologies, or digital medicine. These discoveries would certainly become the first patented generic drugs. How does the FDA respond to the regulation of these novel drugs?
That's a great question. So if we're talking about, digital medicines specifically, I would definitely direct you to our AI latest guidance that the FDA has published. It really does set the regulatory framework, an evolving one that we know for a fact is evolving, in order to really allow developers to understand the regulatory expectation of the FDA. So we have published a number of guidances that really do focus on the development and some of the challenges in the development of these products in evolving science. And I would really support and encourage you to visit our FDA webpage and focus on AI guidance that was published recently.
Okay. Any question from everyone? If not, that brings us to the end of our Q&A session. Thank you, Dr. Sarah Ibrahim, for sharing your expertise and insight with us today. With that, I will hand it back to Mathew to close today's session, or if you have others question, Mathew.
Well, Mathew, I have a question, Sarah.
Sure.
Is a common dossier anywhere inside mutually recognized dossier?
Are you asking, is there a common dossier or is there one that is in the works?
Is there one in the works? I can submit in one country and it will be recognized in 10 other countries.
So that's a great question. So the concept of a common dossier technically exists in the sense of an ECTD. That was the first step, right? So standardize the way applicants submit applications to the agency. So that is a global standard. The Common Technical Document is a global standard. Now, I know that there are a number of other agencies that are involved in some of the collaborative registration dossiers. And I know that WHO has a collaborative registration dossier. We're not involved in that, but that is one of the methods that allows and enables reliance on prior reviews from the FDA and EMA. So that is, that's a good example of that. I would say we do have a number of pilots in the sense it's not a parallel review aspect in the sense of a single dossier, but actually, Project Orbis is not a pilot. Project Orbis is existent and does allow parallel reviews. While you do not have a single dossier, but we do encourage through Project Orbis that applicants seeking approval of an oncology medication to submit their applications in other jurisdictions and allow that parallel review to happen. We, of course, think that many global agencies will benefit from that concept of reliance, and maybe learning through EMA's journey and pathway on the concept of, having a single point of access to multiple jurisdictions might be very helpful for something such as the African Medicines Agency that's coming up. But, there are methods by which you can rely on FDA approval to gain access to multiple jurisdictions, and that varies based on the country you're trying to access with your product. But think of it from this perspective. The ECTD was in fact a concept that minimizes the work on industry to create, for the most part, a very structured single dossier that can be submitted to multiple, while the content may vary based on the regulatory expectations and scientific standards, but the structure is, for the most part, quite consistent.
Great. Thank you, Sarah. Unless there are more questions, I want to thank Sarah for a superb presentation. As always, you have been great interest in this topic. As we can see from the questions that we received, we are grateful to you. I want to thank you on behalf of Aini and FIP on the time and effort that you put in to make this superb presentation. Thank you very much, Sarah.
Thank you so much, everyone.